The reservation book at Ravello Prime never printed his name. It didn't need to. When the black Lincoln pulled to the curb at 8:47 p.m., the maitre d' already had table 7 prepared, center position, back to the exposed brick wall, sight lines to every entrance. Power doesn't announce itself here. It breathes in the silence between courses. Darius Kincaid doesn't dine. He holds court, and tonight someone will die at his table without him knowing. Inside, Crystal caught the amber glow of Edison bulbs suspended from iron chains. Leather booths absorbed conversations that would never reach courtrooms. The air smelled of seared wagyu, truffle oil, and money that didn't ask questions. Darius entered without fanfare. 6'2", charcoal suit tailored in Milan, salt and pepper beard trimmed with surgical precision. He moved through the restaurant like gravity itself, everything bent around him without him touching a single thing. Conversations dimmed as he passed. Not stopped. Just careful. A congressman 2 tables over adjusted his napkin. A real estate developer suddenly found his phone fascinating. The woman in the Hermes scarf turned toward the window, pretending the Hudson River had become more interesting than breathing the same air as Darius Kincaid. He took his seat, ordered the lamb. Rare. Across the dining room, Elara Boone refilled water glasses at table 12, her movements practiced into invisibility. Black slacks, white button-down, hair pulled tight. She had learned early. Rich people only see servers when something goes wrong. Tonight, everything would go wrong. She caught fragments of the table behind her, 2 men in suits leaning close, voices barely audible over the piano jazz drifting from hidden speakers. Meeting Volkov's people tonight. Heard he doesn't negotiate. Someone's leaving in a bag. Alara's hand steadied on the water pitcher. She'd heard rumors about Darius Kincaid. Everyone who worked Manhattan's high-end circuit had. Restaurants kept his favorite scotch. Hotels prepared suites he never confirmed. People who crossed him found their businesses foreclosed, their reputations shredded, their names disappearing from directories like they'd never existed. But she'd never seen him this close. He cut into his appetizer, burrata with compressed heirloom tomatoes, with the kind of precision surgeons reserve for hearts, not cheese. The room moved around him in coordinated silence. Waiters glided. Glassware chimed softly. Conversations stayed muted. No one raised their voice in Ravello Prime. Volume was for people who needed to be heard. Here, you already knew who mattered. Elara turned back to her station, the weight of her grandmother's pendant pressing against her sternum beneath the uniform. She didn't know why she'd worn it tonight. She never wore it to work. But something in the air felt wrong. Charged, like the desert sky before monsoon season, when the pressure drops and every living thing knows to find shelter. Darius Kincaid smiled at something his guest said. 23 minutes from now, he would stop breathing. Power collapses in seconds. Subscribe so you see it coming. Elara remembers the day her grandmother made her swear an oath, one she never understood until tonight. 15 years ago. Gallup, New Mexico. The porch sagged under the weight of summers and her grandmother's rocking chair. Zara Boone sat in late afternoon light, her hands, gnarled from decades of work white families never acknowledged, folding a burlap sack filled with rice. Come here, child. 10-year-old Elara climbed the steps, school backpack still strapped to her shoulders. Zara positioned the sack upright against the porch railing. Watch close. You only get one chance to learn this right. Her grandmother bent the sack forward sharply until it nearly folded in half. Then her palm lifted, not gentle, not hesitant, and struck between what would be shoulder blades on a human body. The impact echoed across the empty yard. 5 times, Zara said. Each one harder than the last, each one angled inward, not flat. Why? Elara asked. Because air gets trapped sometimes, lodged where breathing should happen, and when it does, you don't have time for questions. Zara struck again. The rice inside shifted audibly. Doctors will try their way first. They always do, but their way doesn't always work. Another strike. What if it doesn't work? Alara whispered. Zara's eyes, dark, ancient, carrying knowledge that predated textbooks, locked onto her granddaughter's face. Then you step forward. You remember what I'm teaching you, and you don't wait for permission. The fourth strike came harder. In the desert, you don't wait for permission. The fifth strike was brutal, precise. The sack convulsed, and rice scattered across weathered wood. Young Alara flinched. Why are you teaching me this? Zara set the sack down, wiping her hands on her apron. Because one day, someone powerful will need you, and everyone around them will be too scared or too proud to do what actually works. How do you know? Her grandmother smiled, sad, certain, like she'd already seen the future play out. Because this knowledge came from someone who walked away from it, and it always finds its way back. She pressed something into Alara's palm. A pendant, tarnished silver, etched with symbols Alara couldn't read. Keep this. When the moment comes, you'll feel it here. Zara touched her own chest, right where breath lives. Present day, Ravello Prime. Alara's fingers found the pendant beneath her uniform as Darius Kincaid raised his wine glass across the dining room. Her chest tightened. The pressure in the air shifted. And for reasons she couldn't explain, she knew her grandmother had been right. Dr. Bexley didn't come to Ravello Prime for dinner. He came to be seen saving the right person. Table 4. Corner position with full view of the restaurant's power players. Dr. Nolan Bexley sat opposite Dr. Maribel Kwan, both in business casual that cost more than most people's rent. Kincaid's here, Kwan murmured, adjusting her Cartier watch. Bexley didn't turn. He'd already clocked Darius the moment he entered. You don't make chief of trauma surgery at Mount Sinai without learning to read rooms before you read wounds. I know. You think he knows about the hospital board vote? Doesn't matter. Bexley sliced into his ribeye with surgical precision. If anything happens tonight, we move first. That's all that matters. Kwan leaned back, studying her colleague. They'd worked together for 8 years, long enough to recognize ambition when it wore a white coat. You mean if anything happens to him? Bexley's smile didn't reach his eyes. I mean if opportunity presents itself, we don't hesitate. Mount Sinai's new wing needs a name. Saving Darius Kincaid's life? That's not just medicine. That's a legacy. You're assuming he'd need saving. Everyone needs saving eventually, Maribel. The question is who's positioned to provide it. Across the dining room, a waiter emerged from the kitchen carrying 2 plates, lamb chops, perfectly seared, still steaming. Behind him, a sous chef caught the head server's attention. Table 7's lamb, the sous chef said quietly. The cut's dense. Tell them to chew carefully. The server nodded but didn't relay the message. You didn't give instructions to Darius Kincaid. You gave him what he ordered and stayed invisible. At table 4, Kwan watched the lamb arrive at Darius's table. That's a difficult cut when it's cooked rare. Connective tissue doesn't break down fully. Your point? Dense proteins. Easy to lodge in the airway if someone's not careful. Bexley set down his fork, interest sharpening. How easy? Easier than you'd think, especially if they're talking while eating, distracted, not chewing thoroughly. They watched as Darius received his plate with a nod. His guest, a nervous-looking man in an off-the-rack suit, was already mid-sentence, gesturing anxiously. Business. Always business at these tables. He's not even looking at his food, Kwan observed. Bexley's jaw tightened. Then we stay ready? For what? For the moment, protocol fails. He'd seen it before. Heimlich maneuvers that worked in training videos but collapsed under real-world panic. Airways too swollen, obstructions too large, bodies that didn't respond to textbook solutions. Those were the moments careers were made. Those were the moments names got engraved on hospital wings. Darius Kincaid picked up his knife and fork, laughing at something his guest said. He cut into the lamb, a generous bite, dense and rare. The first cut that would change everything. Doctors don't always save you. What happens when protocol fails? Stay with me. Darius takes one bite, and the most powerful man in the room has 90 seconds to live. It started without ceremony. No warning. No cosmic signal. Just a man eating dinner who forgot to chew completely. Darius brought the fork to his mouth mid-sentence, still talking to his guest about a property deal in Queens. The lamb, rare, dense, rich, entered his mouth as he gestured with his free hand. He chewed twice. Not 3 times, not 4. Twice. Then he swallowed. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. He reached for his wine glass. Then his hand stopped. Midair. Frozen. His jaw tightened. His eyes widened. Not fear yet. Just confusion. The kind of expression that says this isn't supposed to happen to me. Power doesn't expect betrayal from something so small. His guest didn't notice immediately. So the zoning approval should clear by Mr. Kincaid? Darius's chair scraped violently backward. The sound cut through Ravello Prime's carefully orchestrated silence like a gunshot. Every head turned. Darius clawed at his throat. Not dramatically. Not like the movies, but with the desperate primal urgency of a body realizing oxygen has become optional. His face began to darken, from tan to pink to something deeper. At table 4, Bexley's water glass hit the table. He's choking. Quan was already standing. Airway obstruction. We need to move now. They crossed the restaurant in seconds, chairs toppling, napkins falling, the carefully maintained illusion of control shattering like dropped crystal. Bexley reached Darius first. Sir, I'm a doctor. I need you to stand. Darius tried. His legs buckled. Bexley positioned himself behind Darius, arms wrapping around his midsection. First Heimlich thrust, sharp, upward, textbook perfect. Nothing. Darius's eyes bulged. Second thrust, harder. Bexley's arms trembled with the force. Still nothing. Maribel. I see it. Quan moved in, checking Darius's airway. Obstructions lodged, deep. Third thrust. Darius convulsed forward, gagging, but the obstruction held. Around them, Ravello Prime descended into chaos. Bodyguards rushed forward, uncertain whether to intervene or stay back. Guests screamed. Someone shouted to call 911. Darius's knuckles went white as he gripped the table edge. Veins strained at his temples. His lips started losing color. Fourth attempt. Bexley grunted. The thrust lifted Darius off his feet. Nothing. His eyes began to roll back. He's losing consciousness, Quan said, voice tight. We have maybe 30 seconds before. One more. Fifth thrust. Desperate. Brutal. Darius sagged forward, dead weight now, held up only by Bexley's trembling arms. Nothing moved. The obstruction stayed lodged, and across the dining room, invisible, trembling, hearing her grandmother's voice like thunder in her skull, Alara Boone stepped away from her water station. Her hands shook, her heart hammered, but her feet moved. Because in the desert, you don't wait for permission. She's just a waitress. But what if she's the only one who knows how to stop death? Please. Alara's voice came out smaller than she intended. No one heard. The restaurant had become a hurricane of panic. Guests shouting contradictory instructions. Security guards frozen between protocol and terror. Bexley and Quan circling Darius like sharks who'd lost their prey. Darius collapsed to his knees. Air wouldn't come. His vision darkened at the edges. This is how power dies, he thought, choking on meat in front of strangers. Please, Alara said again, louder now. I know another way. Bexley's head snapped toward her. His face, red from exertion, slick with sweat, twisted with irritation. Step back. You're not qualified. But I... Security! Bexley barked. Get her out of here! A guard moved toward Alara. Her grandmother's voice cut through the panic. When they fail, you move. You don't ask. You don't explain. You act. Alara's hand found the pendant beneath her uniform. Warm. Almost burning. Darius's eyes rolled back. His body went limp in Bexley's arms. 10 seconds left. Maybe less. Alara pushed past the security guard, surprising him more than overpowering him, and dropped to her knees beside Darius. What the hell are you doing? Quan shouted. Alara didn't answer. Her hands found Darius's shoulders. She bent him forward, sharply, aggressively, at an angle that made every medical professional in the room inhale in horror. No! Bexley lunged. You'll collapse his airway. Let me finish, Alara said. Her voice didn't shake anymore. It came from somewhere deeper, older, a place where knowledge doesn't need credentials. She bent Darius lower, lower than comfort, lower than protocol, until his chest nearly touched his knees. Her palm lifted, flat, angled inward, positioned exactly where her grandmother had shown her on a burlap sack of rice 15 years ago on a porch in New Mexico. The room held its breath. Security hesitated. Bexley froze mid-reach. Quan's medical instincts screamed that this was wrong, but something in Alara's certainty made her stop. Alara's hand hovered for one eternal second. Then she spoke one word that cut through every voice, every doubt, every scream. Gravity. Her palm descended. The first strike echoed across marble like a judgment. Darius didn't move. Alara struck again. Nothing. Third strike. Still nothing. Security grabbed her arm. She wrenched free, lifted her hand one final time, angled it precisely, and drove it home with everything her grandmother had taught her about survival when medicine fails. Would you trust a stranger to save your life? Comment yes or no below. Then subscribe. You need to see what happens next. Ancient knowledge doesn't ask permission. It demands trust in the moment breath runs out. The fourth strike landed harder than the others. Alara felt it connect, felt the vibration travel through Darius's body like a shockwave searching for resistance. His frame convulsed once, then went terrifyingly still. You're killing him! Someone screamed. But Alara's hands didn't stop. Her grandmother's voice filled her head. Not memory now, but presence. As if Zara Boone herself stood behind her, guiding each movement. The fifth strike is different. You don't hit to force. You hit to invite. The body will release what it's holding if you ask correctly. Alara adjusted her angle. Not flat across the back. Inward. Toward the spine. Where the diaphragm meets the ribs. Where air has nowhere to go but up. Security's hand closed around her shoulder. She shook it off. Her palm lifted one final time. The room tilted into surreal silence, as if every sound had been sucked out through the ventilation system. She could hear her own heartbeat, the creak of leather as someone shifted weight, the faint hum of kitchen equipment behind closed doors. Time didn't slow. It fractured. And in that fracture, Alara saw her grandmother's face superimposed over Darius's gasping form. Saw the porch in gallop. Saw the burlap sack splitting open, rice scattering across sun-bleached wood. Saw Zara's eyes. Don't hesitate, child. Hesitation is what kills them. Alara didn't hesitate. The fifth strike came down like a hammer meeting an anvil, angled, brutal, precise. For one impossible second, nothing happened. Darius hung suspended between life and death, his body a question mark waiting for an answer. Then, something flew from his mouth. Not gracefully, not clean. It shot across the marble floor with violent force, skidding past overturned chairs and dropped napkins until it hit the brass base of a floor lamp with an obscene thunk. Darius convulsed. His entire body arched backward. Air, blessed burning air, tore into his lungs with a sound like ripping fabric. He gasped, choked, coughed so violently his whole frame shook. But he was breathing. The room exploded. Some guests burst into applause, nervous, relieved, not sure what else to do with the adrenaline flooding their systems. Others recoiled in horror, as if they'd just witnessed something obscene. Something that shouldn't work, but did. Bexley stood frozen, arms still outstretched, face slack with shock. Quan's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Security guards looked at each other, uncertain whether to restrain Alara or commend her. And Darius. Darius collapsed sideways into a chair someone had righted behind him. His chest heaved, his throat burned, his pride lay shattered across marble flooring alongside the piece of lamb that had tried to kill him. But he was alive. His eyes found Alara. She knelt beside him still, hands trembling now that the certainty had drained away. She looked terrified, young, completely out of place among the wreckage of Manhattan's most exclusive dining room. Darius's hand shot out, fast, instinctive. It closed around her wrist, not threatening, grounding, like a drowning man clinging to driftwood. "You," he rasped. His voice came out shredded, barely recognizable. "You saved me." Alara nodded, unable to speak. His grip tightened. "Who taught you that?" The question hung between them like smoke. Behind them, paramedics burst through Ravello Prime's entrance. Too late. Always too late when seconds matter. But Alara heard the question, and somewhere in the desert southwest, a grandmother's ghost smiled. "My grandmother," Alara whispered. Something flickered behind Darius's eyes. Recognition, or fear, or both. 1 second separates life from death. Subscribe so you never miss it. The room held its breath. Then something flew across marble, and power learned humility. The obstruction lay on the floor like evidence at a crime scene. Dense, glistening, ordinary. A piece of lamb that had nearly killed the most dangerous man in Manhattan. Paramedics swarmed Darius, checking vitals, shining lights in his eyes, asking questions he couldn't answer through the wreckage of his throat. "Pulse is strong. Blood oxygen recovering. Sir, can you tell me your name?" Darius waved them off with one hand. The other still gripped Alara's wrist like she might vanish if he let go. His eyes never left her face. Around them, Ravello Prime struggled to reassemble itself. Waiters righted chairs. Busboys swept shattered crystal. The maitre d' appeared with apologies and complimentary bottles of wine no one would drink. But the illusion had shattered. You can't unsee a god choking. At table 4, Bexley stood motionless, his hands still positioned for a Heimlich that hadn't worked. His face cycled through emotions too quickly to name. Shock, confusion, humiliation, rage. He'd performed that maneuver 100 times in his career. It always worked. It was supposed to work. Quan touched his arm. "Nolan, don't." His voice came out strangled. "Just don't." She withdrew her hand. Across the room, guests whispered behind cupped palms. "Did you see what she did?" "Just a waitress." "Where did she learn that?" "I've never seen anyone bend someone that far forward. The doctors couldn't save him. But she did." Darius finally released Alara's wrist. His fingers left white marks on her brown skin that faded slowly, like tide marks on sand. "What's your name?" His voice sounded like gravel scraped across concrete. Alara Boone." "Alara." He repeated it like he was committing it to memory, filing it somewhere important. "You said your grandmother taught you." She nodded. "What was her name?" The question felt loaded, dangerous somehow, but Alara answered, "Zara Boone." Darius flinched, actually flinched, like the name had struck him physically. His jaw tightened. His eyes went distant, not unfocused, but looking at something far away, something only he could see. "Where?" he asked quietly. "Where what? Where did she teach you this?" "Gallup, New Mexico." The color drained from Darius's face so completely that a paramedic stepped forward in concern. "Sir, you need to come with us." "I'm fine." Darius stood, shaking off hands, rejecting help. His legs wavered but held. "I'm fine." He wasn't fine. Everyone in the room could see it. But you don't argue with Darius Kincaid. Not even when he's wrong. Especially not when he's wrong. He straightened his jacket with trembling hands, smoothed his beard, rebuilt the armor in real time. But before he could fully reconstruct himself, he looked at Alara one more time. "I need to speak with you, privately, tomorrow." It wasn't a request. His assistant, a severe woman in Prada who'd materialized from nowhere, handed Alara a business card, heavy stock, embossed lettering, an address in Tribeca, and nothing else. 9 a.m., the assistant said. "Don't be late." Then Darius turned and walked toward the exit, flanked by bodyguards who'd proven useless when it mattered. The room parted for him. Always did. Always would. But something had changed. The guests who'd watched him nearly die would never unsee it. Never forget that for 90 seconds, Darius Kincaid had been as mortal as anyone else. And the woman who'd saved him? She stood alone in the center of Ravello Prime, holding a business card, wondering what kind of debt she'd just incurred. Because men like Darius Kincaid didn't forget. And they always collected. By dawn, the most powerful man in New York became the most vulnerable, and the internet wouldn't let him forget. Someone had filmed it. Of course someone had filmed it. In a room full of phones, discretion lasted exactly as long as death seemed possible. The moment survival became certain, instinct took over. Document. Upload. Go viral. By 3 a.m., the video had 200,000 views. By 6 a.m., 2 million. By the time Alara's alarm went off at 7:30, her face was everywhere. Black Waitress saves Mafia boss with ancient technique doctors didn't know. The headline appeared across a dozen gossip sites, news aggregators, and social media platforms. The video showed everything. Darius choking, doctors failing, Alara stepping forward against orders, the 5 strikes, the violent expulsion of the obstruction. But what made it go nuclear was the final frame. Darius Kincaid, untouchable syndicate boss, gripping a waitress's wrist like she'd personally dragged him back from hell. The comments section exploded. @TruthSeeker404. Anyone else notice the doctors just gave up? She literally saved him after they quit trying. @MedStudent2025. What technique is that? We never learned that in school. NYC. Insider. Darius Kincaid doesn't owe anyone. Now he owes her. That's power shift. @SkepticalDoc. Lucky. Pure luck. One more strike and she could have ruptured his spleen. But not everyone celebrated. By 8 a.m., Dr. Nolan Bexley appeared on Morning Health Today, sitting across from an overly cheerful host who clearly smelled blood. "Dr. Bexley, you were there. Can you walk us through what happened?" Bexley's smile didn't reach his eyes. "What you see in the video is a traumatic event that required immediate medical intervention. Dr. Kwan and I performed the standard Heimlich maneuver, which didn't work." A pause. "Airway obstructions can be unpredictable. We were preparing to perform an emergency tracheotomy when Ms. Boone, Intervened. Intervened? She saved his life. She got lucky. Bexley leaned forward, voice sharpening. What she performed was an unverified folk technique with no peer-reviewed studies. In a different scenario, that kind of force could cause serious internal damage. I wouldn't recommend. The host cut him off. But she succeeded where you failed. Bexley's jaw tightened. The interview went viral for all the wrong reasons. Meanwhile, Alara's phone hadn't stopped vibrating since she woke up. Text messages from numbers she didn't recognize. TMZ wants to interview you. Name your price. Book deal opportunity. Call me ASAP. You embarrassed powerful people. Watch your back. That last one came from a blocked number. Alara deleted it with shaking hands. She stood in her cramped studio apartment in Washington Heights, staring at the business card Darius had given her. The embossed address gleamed under cheap fluorescent lighting. 9 a.m. Don't be late. Outside her window, a black sedan idled at the curb. It had been there since 6 a.m., watching. Alara touched her grandmother's pendant. Her phone buzzed again. Another blocked number. This time a photo. Her apartment building, taken from across the street, taken this morning. No message, just the image. Alara's stomach dropped. Saving Darius Kincaid hadn't made her a hero. It had made her visible, and in his world, visibility was the most dangerous thing you could be. Power hides until cameras catch it falling. Subscribe. You'll want to see what happens when they come for her. Darius Kincaid doesn't say thank you. He makes offers you can't refuse, and Alara just got hers. The black sedan's window descended exactly 2 inches, just enough for a voice to escape. Ms. Boone, Mr. Kincaid is waiting. Alara stood on the sidewalk at 8:47 a.m., holding the business card, trying to decide if getting into that car was the smartest or stupidest decision of her life. The driver didn't get out, didn't open her door, just waited with the engine running and the kind of patience that suggested he'd done this before, many times, for people who also hesitated. Alara glanced back at her apartment building. 4th floor, fire escape, peeling paint, home. Could she just not go? Her phone buzzed. Another text from a blocked number. The car is a courtesy. Walking would be unwise. Her blood went cold. She got in the car. The interior smelled of leather and something else. Power, maybe. Or just money. Sometimes they were the same thing. They drove in silence, down Broadway, through Tribeca, past boutiques that didn't display prices and restaurants that required reservations 6 months in advance. The sedan pulled up to a building Alara had walked past 100 times but never truly seen. Unmarked, brutalist concrete and tinted glass. The kind of architecture that said we don't need to announce ourselves. The driver finally spoke. 6th floor, he's expecting you. Alara stepped out. The lobby was empty except for a single security desk manned by someone who looked former military. He didn't ask her name, just gestured toward a private elevator with a key already inserted. The doors closed. The elevator climbed. Alara's reflection stared back at her from polished steel. She'd worn her best outfit, which still looked like Target clearance compared to what everyone else in this building probably wore. The doors opened directly into a private hospital suite. Not a hospital. A suite that happened to have medical equipment arranged tastefully around furniture that cost more than her yearly salary. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the East River. Morning light poured in like liquid gold. And in the center of it all, sitting in a leather chair, throat bruised purple, sat Darius Kincaid. He looked smaller than he had at Ravello Prime. More human. Mortal. Ms. Boone. His voice was still wrecked. Thank you for coming. Did I have a choice? A ghost of a smile. No. He gestured to the chair across from him. Alara sat, hands folded in her lap, trying to appear calm while her heart hammered against her ribs. Darius studied her for a long moment. Not threatening, just assessing. "Do you know who I am?" he asked finally. "I know what people say." "And what do people say?" "That you're dangerous. That you own half of Manhattan. That people who cross you disappear. All true." He said it without pride or shame, just fact. "Do you know why I asked you here? To thank me?" "I don't thank people, Ms. Boone. I compensate them." He reached into a drawer and withdrew an envelope. Thick, heavy. $50,000, cash. Consider it payment for services rendered. Alara stared at the envelope like it might explode. "I don't want your money." Darius raised an eyebrow. "Everyone wants money. I want to go home. I want my life back. I want to stop getting threatening texts from people I don't know." "That won't stop." Darius set the envelope on the table between them. "You saved my life in front of 200 witnesses and a dozen cameras. You can't unring that bell." "Then what am I supposed to do?" "You come work for me. I protect you. You teach my people what you know. Everyone benefits." "And if I say no?" Darius leaned forward, wincing slightly from his bruised throat. "Then you walk out of here with nothing, and the people who think you embarrassed them, the doctors whose reputations you damaged, the competitors who see my weakness as opportunity, they'll come for you. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually." He pushed the envelope closer. "I'm not the threat, Ms. Boone. I'm the solution." Alara's hands trembled. "Before I answer," she said quietly, "I need to know something." "What?" "When I told you my grandmother's name, Zara Boone, you looked like you'd seen a ghost. Why?" Darius's face went carefully blank. Too blank. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." Silence stretched between them like a razor wire. Finally, Darius reached into another drawer. He withdrew an old photograph, creased, sun-bleached, decades old, and placed it face up on the table. Alara's breath caught. One picture destroys the wall between past and present, and Darius realizes the woman who saved him carries his father's ghost. The photograph landed on the table between them like a grenade with the pin already pulled. Alara stared. Her throat closed. Her vision narrowed to that single image, faded, creased, sun-damaged but unmistakable. Two figures stood in desert landscape. Saguaro cacti rose behind them like sentinels. The sky burned orange with either dawn or dusk, impossible to tell which. On the left, a woman in traditional Bedouin dress, headscarf framing a face Alara would recognize anywhere. Her grandmother, younger, stronger, but the same eyes. The same hands that had demonstrated survival techniques on burlap sacks. Zara Boone. And beside her, a man Alara had never seen before. Tall, lean, dark skin and darker eyes. He wore canvas pants and a work shirt rolled to the elbows. His hand rested on Zara's shoulder, not possessive, but familiar. Respectful. The kind of touch reserved for teachers, or friends who'd become family. "That's my grandmother," Alara whispered. "I know." Darius's voice came out strangled. "Who's the man?" Silence. Darius's hands trembled as he reached for the photograph, then pulled back like it might burn him. His name was Ferris Kincaid. Each word seemed to cost him something. "My father." The air left the room. Alara's head snapped up. "What?" "My father." Darius stood abruptly, pacing to the window, putting distance between himself and the photograph. "Before he disappeared. Before I erased him from my life." "I don't understand." "Neither did I." Darius pressed his forehead against the glass. "Not until last night. Not until you said her name." He turned and Alara saw something she didn't think existed in men like Darius Kincaid. Shame. "My father was a traitor," Darius said. Textiles, mostly. He traveled through the Southwest in the 80s and 90s. New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada. He'd disappear for months at a time, come back with stories about desert survival techniques, indigenous wisdom, ancient knowledge. Darius laughed, bitter, empty. I thought it was primitive, backward. I was 17, already running numbers for the Volkov family in Brooklyn, making real money, building real power, and he'd come home talking about how to extract water from cacti, how to navigate by stars, how to save lives with nothing but your hands. The technique, Alara breathed. The strikes. He learned them from someone in the Bedouin community, spent 6 months in New Mexico studying with... Darius's voice cracked. With your grandmother. Alara's hands found the pendant at her throat. She never told me. She never said... Why would she? Darius crossed back to the table, sank into his chair like gravity had doubled. To her, he was probably just another student, someone who wanted to learn, someone who respected the knowledge. He picked up the photograph with shaking hands. But to me, he was an embarrassment. When I turned 18, I told him I didn't want his desert wisdom. I wanted money, influence, power that didn't depend on knowing which plants were edible. The words tumbled out now. Decades of buried guilt finding voice. I cut him off, completely. Changed my last name from Ferris to Kincaid, my mother's maiden name. Built my empire from nothing. Became the man you see now. What happened to him? He disappeared, 15 years ago. Left a note saying he was going back to the desert, back to people who valued what he knew. Darius's eyes glistened. I never looked for him. Never tried to find him. I was too busy building power to care about the man who gave me life. He set the photograph down carefully, reverently. And last night, when you stepped forward and used that technique, the exact technique my father tried to teach me when I was 16, I realized something. What? That the knowledge I rejected is the reason I'm still breathing. That the father I called primitive and backward left behind wisdom that saved his son's life 30 years later, through a woman whose grandmother learned it from him. Tears tracked down Darius's face. He didn't wipe them away. The universe has a sick sense of irony, Ms. Boone. I spent my entire adult life trying to forget where I came from, trying to bury my father's memory under money and violence and respect, bought with fear. He met her eyes. And the only reason I survived last night is because he taught someone like your grandmother. Because she taught you. Because you remembered what I deliberately forgot. Alara's own eyes burned. She thought of her grandmother's words. This knowledge came from someone who walked away from it, and it always finds its way back. She knew, Alara whispered. My grandmother. She knew this would happen. What do you mean? Before she died, she told me, one day someone powerful will need you, and this knowledge will save them. Alara's voice shook. She knew. Somehow, she knew. Darius closed his eyes. Your grandmother was wiser than both of us. They sat in silence, two people connected by a thread they never knew existed. By a man who taught survival to a woman in New Mexico, who taught it to her granddaughter, who used it to save the life of the son who'd abandoned him. Legacy didn't move in straight lines. It spiraled through decades and geography and relationships, waiting for the moment when rejection and redemption finally met. What now? Alara asked. Darius opened his eyes. They looked different, clearer. Now? He slid the envelope of cash back across the table. Now I stop trying to buy my way out of debt, because what I owe you, what I owe your grandmother, what I owe my father, can't be paid with money. He stood, straightening his jacket. Now I do what I should have done 30 years ago. I honor the knowledge instead of burying it. I find out if my father is still alive, And if he is, his voice broke. I tell him I'm sorry. What you reject might be what saves you. If you're not subscribed, comment why. We need to know. Saving a mob boss doesn't make you a hero. It makes you a target. And Alara just learned names have consequences. The news cycle moved like a wildfire. By Tuesday afternoon, Alara's face had appeared on 17 different news outlets, 43 social media platforms, and one particularly vicious Reddit thread titled, "Waitress Humiliates Top NYC Doctors with Ancient Folk Medicine." The comments section was a war zone. At RealityCheck88, "She got lucky. One wrong angle and she ruptures his liver. This isn't medicine, it's recklessness." At Desert Wisdom, "Y'all really gonna dismiss indigenous knowledge because a black woman used it successfully?" The racism jumped out. At MedStudent2027, "Our professor showed us the video, said it's biomechanically sound but not taught because liability issues. Make that make sense." At Anonymous, "Doc, Bexley's ego couldn't handle being shown up by someone without a degree. That's the real story. But social media praise meant nothing when your apartment building's lobby filled with photographers at 6 a.m. Or when TMZ called your phone 17 times before breakfast. Or when you opened your mailbox to find an envelope with no return address containing a single sentence printed on expensive cardstock. You embarrassed powerful people. Hubris has consequences." Alara's hands shook as she locked her apartment door, all 3 locks, plus the chain, and pressed her back against it. Her phone buzzed. A news alert. Dr. Nolan Bexley calls for medical board review of unqualified emergency interventions. She clicked the link. Bexley's face filled her screen, sitting across from a primetime news anchor whose Botox couldn't quite hide her predatory smile. "Dr. Bexley, some are calling Alara Boone a hero, but you've expressed concerns?" "Absolutely." Bexley leaned forward, voice measured and reasonable. "I have the utmost respect for Ms. Boone's intentions, but good intentions don't replace medical training. What she performed was an unverified technique with significant risk of internal injury, spinal damage, or airway collapse. But it worked. This time, in this specific scenario, with this specific patient." Bexley's smile didn't reach his eyes. "But encouraging untrained civilians to perform aggressive interventions based on viral videos? That's dangerous. That's how people die." The anchor nodded sympathetically. "You're calling for regulation?" "I'm calling for responsibility. Emergency medicine has protocols for a reason. We can't allow social media fame to override decades of peer-reviewed research." The interview cut to B-roll footage. Alara performing the strikes, Darius collapsing, the obstruction flying across marble, over and over, slowed down, analyzed, dissected. "As you can see," Bexley continued, voiceover playing over the footage, "the force applied here could easily cause rib fractures, pneumothorax, or liver laceration in different circumstances." Alara's phone buzzed again. Her former manager at Ravello Prime. "Corporate called. They're restructuring. Your position has been eliminated. Sorry." Fired. She'd been fired for saving a man's life. Another buzz. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. "Ms. Boone?" A woman's voice, clipped, professional. "This is Miranda Chen from the New York State Medical Board. We need to schedule an interview regarding the incident at Ravello Prime. There are questions about practicing medicine without a license." Alara's stomach dropped. "I didn't practice medicine, We'll discuss that at the interview. Can you come to our offices Thursday at 2 p.m.? Failure to appear will be noted in our report. See you Thursday." The line went dead. Alara sank onto her couch, second-hand, rescued from a curb in Washington Heights 3 years ago, and pressed her palms against her eyes. Her phone buzzed continuously now. Interview request, Nightline. Book deal opportunity, 6 figures. Speaking engagement, Columbia Medical School. And then, from a blocked number, a photograph. Her apartment building, taken this morning, ground level. Then another photo. Her walking to the bodega on the corner yesterday. Another. Her standing at the subway platform. Someone had been following her for days, documenting her movements, studying her patterns. No message, just the photos. Alara's breath came short and fast. The pendant at her throat felt heavy. Her grandmother's voice echoed. When you save powerful men, you inherit their enemies. Her phone rang. Darius Kincaid. She answered on the first ring. Mr. Kincaid. They're watching you. His voice was calm, too calm. I know. I've had people monitoring the surveillance. What? The photos you just received. I know who sent them. It's not my organization. It's Bexley's people. He's building a case to destroy your credibility before you can damage his. Alara's hands trembled. I don't want to damage anyone. I just want my life back. Your life back? Darius laughed, bitter, knowing. Ms. Boone, your old life ended the moment you stepped forward at Ravello Prime. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unknow what you know. Then what am I supposed to do? You come work for me. Today. Now. I'll send a car. You'll stay in a secure location until we neutralize the threats. I'm not running. This isn't running. This is survival. You taught me that, remember? Alara closed her eyes. Outside her apartment, footsteps paused in the hallway, stopped directly outside her door. A shadow appeared beneath the gap. Someone was standing there, listening. Ms. Boone. Darius's voice sharpened. Are you alone? I thought I was, she whispered. Get out. Now. Fire escape. My people are 2 blocks away. Move. The doorknob turned slightly, testing the locks. Alara grabbed her grandmother's pendant, her phone, and nothing else. Visibility is dangerous when you threaten the wrong egos. Subscribe before the next move. Ferris Kincaid disappeared 30 years ago, but he left behind words his son was too proud to read until now. The safe house wasn't what Alara expected. No bunker, no warehouse, just a brownstone in Park Slope with exposed brick, hardwood floors, and enough security cameras to monitor a small nation. Darius met her in the living room, flanked by 2 bodyguards who looked former special forces. You're safe here, he said. No one knows about this property, not even my closest associates. Alara sank into a leather chair that probably cost more than her rent. Her hands still shook from the fire escape climb, the sprint through alleys, the unmarked car that had materialized exactly where Darius promised. Who was at my door? Private investigator, hired by Bexley to document your daily routine, financial struggles, any potential vulnerabilities. Darius's jaw tightened. He's building a narrative. Poor, desperate waitress performs reckless stunt for attention and money. He'll leak it to media outlets that already question your credibility. Can he do that? He's doing it. Medical board interview Thursday? That's him. The news coverage questioning your technique? Him. The anonymous threats? Also him. Darius poured amber liquid into 2 glasses, offered her one. Dr. Bexley is a small man with a large ego. You made him look incompetent on camera. He won't stop until he destroys you or restores his reputation, preferably both. Alara didn't touch the drink. So, what do? We fight back, but not his way. Darius crossed to a wall safe hidden behind a painting. We fight with the one thing he can't discredit. He withdrew a leather-bound journal, worn, travel-stained, held together with string where the binding had deteriorated. My father's journal, Darius said quietly. I found it in storage 3 years ago. Never opened it. Couldn't bear to. He set it on the table between them like an offering. But last night, after you left, I read every page, front to back. 30 years of words I was too proud to hear when he was alive. Alara leaned forward. The journal's cover had been tooled leather once. Now it was scarred, faded, marked by years in desert heat. What does it say? Darius opened it carefully. His fingers traced handwriting that slanted right, pressed hard into paper, the writing of someone who meant every word. It's a record of his travels through the Southwest, his studies with indigenous healers, Bedouin teachers, desert survival experts, people the medical establishment dismissed as folklore. Darius's voice caught. People like your grandmother. He turned pages until he found one marked with a faded ribbon. June 17, 1994, Gallup, New Mexico. Darius read aloud. Met a woman today who understands that survival knowledge doesn't require degrees, only memory and trust. Zara Boone. She carries techniques passed down through 5 generations. Bedouin origins, she thinks, though the lineage is unclear. Doesn't matter. What matters is it works. Alara's breath hitched. Darius continued. She taught me the airway clearance technique today. 5 strikes, precise angles, gravity-assisted. I've seen Heimlich fail too many times. This is different. This is older. This remembers that bodies aren't machines. They're rhythms. You don't force them. You invite them back to equilibrium. His voice cracked on the next paragraph. I tried to teach my son. He called it primitive. Said real medicine happens in hospitals, not on porches. He's 17, hungry for power I don't understand. I'm losing him to a world that values money over memory. Darius closed his eyes. 3 more entries about you, he whispered. About your grandmother teaching him. About him trying and failing to share it with me. About him realizing I'd already chosen a different path. He turned to another marked page. December 3rd, 1995. Darius told me today he's changing his last name. Doesn't want to be associated with backward desert nonsense. He wants to be Kincaid now, his mother's name, wants to erase me completely. Part of me is angry, but mostly I'm sad, because I know this knowledge will matter someday. Maybe not for him, maybe not in his lifetime, but knowledge like this doesn't die. It waits. It finds the people who need it when doctors with degrees and machines run out of answers. Zara said something today that I can't forget. The son who rejects you will be saved by the memory you left behind. Tell him not to mourn rejection. It's just redemption walking backward. Darius's tears fell onto the journal, darkening the aged paper. She knew. He choked out. Your grandmother. She saw this coming. 30 years before it happened. Alara reached across the table, her hand covering his. 2 strangers connected by a thread neither understood. He loved you, Alara said softly. Every word in that journal. He loved you even when you pushed him away. I know. Darius's shoulders shook. That's what makes it unbearable. He turned to the journal's final page. The last entry. January 8th, 1996. I'm going back to the desert. Back to people who value what I know. But I'm leaving this journal for Darius. Maybe he'll read it someday. Maybe he won't. If you're reading this, son, know this. I never stopped loving you. I never stopped hoping you'd remember where you came from. And if the knowledge I tried to teach you ever saves your life, if it comes back to you through some unexpected path, remember that rejection and redemption are the same journey, just walked in different directions. Find the woman who carries what I taught. Her name is Zara Boone. She'll remember me. And maybe, through her, you'll remember yourself. The room fell silent. Outside, New York hummed and roared, indifferent to the small resurrections happening in brownstone living rooms. Darius carefully closed the journal. My father died 8 years ago, he said. I never got to tell him I was sorry. Never got to say I was wrong. He looked at Alara with red-rimmed eyes. But I can honor what he left behind. I can make sure his knowledge, your grandmother's knowledge, doesn't die with them. How? Darius stood, resolve hardening his features back into the man who ruled half of Manhattan. By building something they can't ignore, something Bexley and his medical boards can't destroy with interviews and investigations. What? A foundation, research, documentation. We'll prove the technique works, not with anecdotes, with data, with lives saved, with evidence even doctors can't dismiss. He extended his hand. But I can't do it alone. I need someone who carries the knowledge, someone who remembers. Alara looked at his outstretched hand, at the journal that contained her grandmother's prophecy, at the path that had led her from a porch in New Mexico to a safe house in Brooklyn, connected to a man whose father had planted seeds decades ago that were only now bearing fruit. She took his hand. "Okay," she said. "Let's honor them both." Some truths wait decades to surface. Stay with us. You'll want to see this. Darius Kincaid built empires on fear, but his greatest legacy would be built on the knowledge he once rejected. The announcement came 3 weeks later, not in a press release, not through publicists. Darius stood in the ballroom of the Mandarin Oriental, facing 200 journalists, medical professionals, and skeptics who'd come to watch him explain why a crime boss suddenly cared about emergency medicine. Alara stood backstage, hands trembling, watching on a monitor. 3 weeks ago, Darius began, voice steady despite the bruises still visible on his throat. I nearly died in one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants. 2 highly qualified doctors performed the Heimlich maneuver. It failed. Protocol failed. Training failed. The room shifted uncomfortably. Cameras zoomed in on Bexley sitting third row, arms crossed, jaw tight. What saved me, Darius continued, was a technique most medical schools don't teach. An ancient method passed down through generations, dismissed as folklore by institutions that prefer peer-reviewed journals over lived experience. He clicked a remote. Behind him, the screen filled with the photograph, his father standing beside Zara Boone in the New Mexico desert. This is my father, Ferris Kincaid. He spent years learning survival techniques from indigenous communities and Bedouin teachers. The woman beside him is Zara Boone, a healer who understood that knowledge doesn't require degrees, only memory and respect. Murmurs rippled through the audience. I rejected my father's teachings, Darius said, and for the first time in his public life, his voice cracked. Called them primitive, backward, useless in the modern world. I cut him out of my life to build power on foundations I thought were stronger. He paused, gathering himself. The technique that saved me 3 weeks ago? My father tried to teach it to me when I was 16. I refused to learn. Thought I knew better. The room went silent. But Zara Boone taught it to her granddaughter, and that granddaughter, Alara Boone, used it when modern medicine had exhausted its options. Darius gestured off stage. Ms. Boone, please join me. Alara's stomach dropped. This wasn't the plan. They'd agreed she'd stay backstage, observe, not be paraded in front of cameras that had already dissected her life. But Darius's assistant touched her shoulder. He needs you out there. Alara walked onto that stage feeling like she was walking toward a firing squad. The applause started scattered, then built. Not everyone joined. Bexley and several doctors in the front rows remained motionless, but enough people clapped that it felt almost genuine. Darius waited until she reached his side before continuing. Today, I'm announcing the establishment of the Zara Boone Foundation for Ancestral Emergency Medicine. We're liquidating holdings worth $50 million to fund research, documentation, and training programs for techniques that modern medicine has overlooked. Gasps, camera flashes, furious note-taking. Our mission is simple. Prove that ancient knowledge deserves a place alongside modern protocols, not instead of alongside. Because the next time someone's airway is blocked and the Heimlich fails, first responders should have options beyond watching someone die while waiting for surgical intervention. A hand shot up. Bexley stood without waiting to be called on. Mr. Kincaid, with all due respect, you're not a medical professional. Neither is Ms. Boone. What qualifies either of you to challenge established emergency protocols? Darius smiled. Cold, sharp, dangerous. What qualifies me? I'm alive, and the established protocols you mentioned left me 30 seconds from brain death. As for Ms. Boone's qualifications, he turned to her, and she saw genuine respect in his eyes. She carries knowledge your medical schools forgot existed. She remembered what I chose to forget, and she had the courage to act when credentialed experts gave up. Bexley's face darkened. You're encouraging untrained civilians to perform aggressive interventions based on anecdotal evidence. That's reckless. That's how people die. People are already dying. Alara's voice cut through the tension before she could stop herself. Every head turned. She hadn't meant to speak, hadn't prepared remarks. But standing there, watching Bexley dismiss her grandmother's legacy as folklore, something inside her snapped. My grandmother saved 17 lives over 40 years using this technique, Alara said, her voice gaining strength. 17 documented cases where people were choking, where the Heimlich had failed or wasn't working fast enough, where she intervened and they survived. I have the records. Hospital discharge papers, thank you letters from families. She stepped forward, closer to the edge of the stage. You want to talk about qualifications? My grandmother couldn't afford medical school, couldn't get past hospital administrators who looked at her skin color and her accent and decided her knowledge wasn't worth listening to. But she kept teaching anyway, kept saving people anyway, because she understood something your institutions forgot. Alara's voice rang out clear and certain. Knowledge doesn't care about your credentials. It cares about whether you remember it when someone stops breathing. The room erupted. Half the audience burst into applause. The other half sat rigid with disapproval. Bexley's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Darius touched Alara's shoulder, gentle, grounding, and faced the cameras directly. The Foundation will host a demonstration in 6 weeks. 200 trauma physicians, paramedics, and emergency responders. We'll document the technique properly, measure force, angles, success rates, everything your peer review process demands. He paused for effect. And Ms. Boone will lead the training, not because she has a degree, because she has something more valuable. She has memory that works when textbooks fail. Bexley stood abruptly, gathering his belongings. This is a publicity stunt, he announced to anyone listening. And when someone gets hurt using this ancient wisdom, I'll make sure everyone remembers who encouraged them. He stormed toward the exit. But Darius's next words stopped him mid-stride. Dr. Bexley, I hope you'll attend the demonstration. We need skeptics in the room. Need people who'll hold us to rigorous standards. After all, Darius's smile was pure predator. What kind of foundation would we be if we couldn't handle criticism from doctors who've never actually saved a choking victim? The room went silent. Bexley's face flushed crimson. He turned, and for a moment it looked like he might respond. Instead, he shoved through the doors and disappeared. Later, in the car back to the safe house, Alara's hands still shook. I shouldn't have said that. I made it worse. You made it real. Darius stared out the window at Manhattan rushing past. Bexley expected us to apologize, to defer to his authority. You didn't. That's what they'll remember. What if I can't do this? What if I freeze in front of 200 doctors? Darius turned to her, and she saw something unexpected in his eyes. Faith, you won't freeze. You know why? Why? Because this isn't about you anymore. It's about your grandmother, my father. Every person who carried knowledge the world tried to forget. He touched the journal that now lived in his jacket pocket. They're counting on us. And people like us don't freeze when it matters. Knowledge doesn't need a degree to save lives. Subscribe so you're here when she proves it. 900 words. 200 doctors waited to see a waitress fail, but Alara Boone doesn't perform for approval anymore. The Columbia Medical Center auditorium smelled of antiseptic and skepticism. 200 seats filled with trauma surgeons, emergency physicians, paramedics, and medical students who'd come to witness either a revolution or a catastrophe. They weren't sure which. Probably both. Alara stood backstage, heart hammering against ribs that felt too small to contain her panic. Through the curtain gap, she could see them. White coats, pressed suits, tablets ready to document every mistake. In the third row, Dr. Bexley sat with his arms crossed and his jaw set, a man waiting for vindication. 5 minutes, a stagehand whispered. Alara's hands found her grandmother's pendant. The silver had warmed against her skin during the past 6 weeks of preparation, document review, technique refinement, endless practice sessions with medical dummies that didn't judge her. But medical dummies didn't have reputations to protect, didn't have egos invested in proving her wrong. Medical dummies didn't look at her like she was either a prophet or a fraud. You ready? Darius appeared beside her, immaculate in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her childhood home. No. Good. Ready people are overconfident. Scared people pay attention. He adjusted her microphone with surprising gentleness. Remember, you're not performing for them. You're teaching them. There's a difference. What if they don't listen? They will. Want to know why? Why? Because you're the only person in that room who's actually used this technique to save a life. They have theories. You have evidence. Evidence always wins eventually. The stagehand returned. 2 minutes. Alara closed her eyes, breathed, heard her grandmother's voice, not memory now, but presence, like Zara Boone herself stood in that auditorium waiting. You'll need this when doctors fail someone powerful. She opened her eyes. Let's honor them both. The stage lights hit like a physical force when she walked out. 200 faces turned toward her, some curious, some hostile, most carefully neutral in that way medical professionals perfect to hide judgment. Alara approached the podium, placed her grandmother's pendant on the surface where she could see it, a reminder of why she was here. My grandmother, she began, voice steadier than expected, couldn't afford medical school. She cleaned hospital floors for 30 years while doctors walked past her like she was invisible, like her existence didn't matter. The room shifted. This wasn't the opening they'd expected. But she knew something those doctors didn't. She knew that knowledge doesn't require permission to work. It doesn't ask to see your credentials before it saves your life. Alara looked directly at Bexley. She taught me a technique that modern emergency medicine has forgotten. Not because it doesn't work, but because it came from communities you stopped listening to when you decided only peer-reviewed journals contain truth. Someone in the back row, a young resident maybe, started clapping. It spread. Not everyone joined. Bexley's section remained silent as stone, but enough people clapped that Alara's chest unclenched slightly. Today, I'm going to show you what saved Darius Kincaid's life when the Heimlich maneuver failed. I'll explain the biomechanics, the physics, the reasons it works, because you deserve to understand before you judge. She gestured to a volunteer, a paramedic who'd agreed to be the demonstration model. The key difference is gravity and angle. Standard Heimlich relies on diaphragmatic thrust to create upward pressure, but when the obstruction is lodged too deeply or too firmly, upward pressure alone may not generate enough force. Alara positioned the volunteer, bending him forward at the waist, far more aggressively than standard protocol suggested. Murmurs rippled through the audience. "This angle changes everything," she continued. "You're not just creating upward pressure. You're allowing gravity to work with you, not against you. And the strikes," she demonstrated in slow motion, palm placement, angle of entry, the precise inward trajectory. 5 strikes, progressively harder, each angled toward the spine. You're not hitting to bruise. You're hitting to create a compression wave that travels through tissue density until it reaches the obstruction. Basic physics. Controlled percussion. She finished the demonstration. The volunteer stood, gave a thumbs up to confirm no discomfort. Scattered applause, more note-taking. Bexley's section remained unmoved. Then, a sound from the audience. A choking sound. Everyone's head turned. 5th row. A doctor in his 60s, face reddening, hand at his throat. He'd been drinking coffee. A piece of bagel had lodged wrong. The room froze. It happened so fast, no one processed it immediately. 1 second, a man was sitting. The next second, he couldn't breathe. 2 nearby doctors stood, muscle memory taking over, reaching for him, attempting the Heimlich. First thrust. Nothing. Second thrust. Nothing. The man's face darkened from pink to purple. Alara didn't think. Thinking would have paralyzed her, would have reminded her that 200 experts were watching, that one mistake would destroy everything her grandmother had built, that Bexley was already standing, already moving toward the victim with authority that said, "I'll handle this." But her grandmother's voice cut through every doubt. "In the desert, you don't wait for permission." Alara jumped off the stage, crossed the auditorium in seconds that felt like hours. "Let me through." The doctors stepped back, some reluctantly, others too shocked to argue. The choking doctor dropped to his knees. Alara caught him, positioned him, bent him forward at that impossible angle that made everyone behind her gasp in alarm. Her palm lifted. The room held its collective breath. 5 strikes. Precise, progressively harder, each one angled exactly as she'd just demonstrated. 1, 2, 3, 4. The obstruction shot across the auditorium floor, bouncing off someone's shoe. The doctor convulsed, inhaled violently, and collapsed into Alara's arms, gasping, alive, eyes wide with the kind of gratitude that transcends language. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Then someone in the back row stood and clapped. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, the entire auditorium was on its feet. Even Bexley's section, even the skeptics who'd come to watch her fail, applauding with the kind of intensity that said they'd just witnessed something that shattered their certainty. Alara helped the doctor to a seat, checked his breathing, confirmed he was stable. Then she turned to face the standing ovation. And caught Darius's eye in the back row. He wasn't clapping. He was crying. Real life doesn't wait for credentials. Subscribe now. This story isn't over. Legacy isn't what you build in boardrooms. It's what outlives you when breath returns to someone's lungs. 6 months later, Alara stood in an airport terminal watching CNN on the departure gate monitor. The chyron read, "Zara Boone Foundation trains 10,000 first responders across 15 states." The report showed firefighters in Detroit, paramedics in Phoenix, school nurses in Portland, all learning the technique that had saved 2 lives on camera and 17 more that Alara knew about. Probably dozens more that she didn't. Her phone buzzed. A text from Darius. "Chicago PD just confirmed another save using the technique. That's 23 documented cases in 6 months. Your grandmother's legacy is spreading." Alara smiled, typed back, "Our grandmother's legacy. Don't forget your father." 3 dots appeared, then, "Never again." She turned from the monitor as boarding began for her flight to Albuquerque. First class, something she still wasn't used to. The foundation paid her salary now, enough to quit waitressing, enough to travel, teaching anyone who'd listen, enough to finally visit her grandmother's grave without shame. The flight attendant recognized her, People did now, after the Columbia demonstration went viral, but said nothing, just smiled and brought extra water without being asked. 3 hours later, Ilara stood in a desert cemetery outside Gallup, where sagebrush grew between weathered headstones and the sky stretched endless and blue. Zara Boone's grave was simple, just her name, dates, and a quote Ilara had chosen: "Knowledge waits for those who remember." "Hi, Grandma," Ilara whispered, kneeling in red dirt that stained her jeans. "I brought someone to meet you." Behind her, a car door closed. Darius approached slowly, carrying something wrapped in canvas. He looked different out here, smaller somehow. Less of the Manhattan predator, more of the son who'd lost his father to pride and found him again through strangers' memories. He knelt beside Ilara. "Zara Boone," he said to the headstone, voice thick. "I'm Darius, Ferris Kincaid's son. I think you knew him?" Silence answered, just wind through sagebrush and the distant cry of a hawk. "He spoke about you in his journal, said you taught him things medical schools had forgotten, said you were the wisest person he'd ever met." Darius unwrapped the canvas carefully. "I never got to thank you for teaching him, for teaching your granddaughter, for remembering what I refused to learn." Inside the canvas, a small tree, piñon pine, native to these mountains. "I brought this from New York," Darius said. "Thought maybe planting something that grows might honor what you built." Ilara's eyes burned. "She'd like that." They dug together, a crime boss and a former waitress, kneeling in desert dirt, planting legacy one shovelful at a time. When the tree stood upright, roots covered, water poured, Darius reached into his jacket, withdrew his father's journal. "I've been carrying this everywhere," he said, "reading entries to medical boards, journalists, anyone who'll listen. But I think it belongs here now, where it started." He placed the journal at the base of the piñon pine. "Find him," Ilara said suddenly. "Your father. If he's still alive, find him. Tell him what happened." "I tried. Hired investigators. No record after 1996. It's like he vanished into the desert and never came back. Maybe he's not meant to be found through investigators." "What do you mean?" "My grandmother always said knowledge finds you when you're ready. Maybe your father is waiting for you to look in the right places." Darius stared at the journal for a long moment. Then he opened it to the final page, the one with his father's last entry. Read it aloud one more time. "If you're reading this, son, know this. I never stopped loving you. Find the woman who carries what I taught. She'll remember me." His voice cracked on the last line. "And maybe, through her, you'll remember yourself." "I remember now," Darius whispered to the grave, to the journal, to the ghost of a father he'd rejected. "I'm sorry it took 30 years. I'm sorry you weren't here to see what your knowledge became, but I promise, I'll spend the rest of my life making sure it survives." Ilara took his hand. Two people connected by thread they never knew existed. By a man who'd taught survival to a woman in New Mexico, who'd taught it to her granddaughter, who'd used it to save the son who'd walked away. "She knew," Ilara said. "My grandmother. She told me when I was 10. The son who rejects you will be saved by the memory you left behind." She was talking about you, about this moment. She saw it coming 30 years before it happened. How? Because some knowledge doesn't die. It waits. And when the moment comes, when breath matters more than pride, when survival matters more than credentials, it finds the people who need it most. They stood together in desert silence as the sun tracked west and shadows lengthened across red earth. A hawk circled overhead. The piñon pine's branches swayed in wind that smelled of sage and rain coming. And somewhere, in hospitals and fire stations and schools across 15 states, First responders learned techniques that textbooks had forgotten but memory preserved. Zara Boone's legacy didn't belong to the past. It lived in every breath restored, every life saved, every moment when ancient knowledge met modern crisis and said, "I remember. Let me help." Some knowledge doesn't require permission. It just requires someone brave enough to step forward when experts say it's impossible. Someone like a waitress who remembered her grandmother's hands. Someone like a crime boss who finally understood what his father had been trying to teach him. Someone like you, reading this now, learning that the most powerful medicine doesn't always come from the places you'd expect. It comes from memory, from legacy, from the moment breath returns to lungs that had forgotten how. Stories like this don't go viral by accident. They survive because people like you refuse to let them die. Subscribe, because the next one might save someone you love.